Well, the same thing is true for our lives and our careers. And this is what hit me. And this is what I really wanted to share with you. Our calendar is our container for our life. So often we are overwhelmed, we are burnt out, we are stressed in our lives because we overfill them with things. We overfill. We don't appropriate the amount of time something that's going to take. And we put things into our lives, which is our calendar, which is our container, that don't fit. And then when we're stressed out running from the first party to the second party to the third party, and we have no energy by the end of the day, and we're not getting the things done we want in life, it's because we're doing things that don't fit within our life.
Hey friends, it's Mary, and this is the Mary Guirovich Show, a podcast that champions today's working women to gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to up-level your career while strengthening your faith and living your dream life, all in record time. We'll cover topics like career advancement, leadership, personal development, faith, and health and wellness, so you can intentionally create a career and life full of more abundance, joy, and love. Let's get started.
Hey friends, welcome on into this episode of the Mary Guirovich Show. I'm so excited that you're joining me here today as we talk about containers. I know you're thinking, what? Embrace the container? What is that? What does that mean? And why is this important? Well, today we are going to be diving deep into containers and talking all about them. The other day I was listening to the Mel Robbins podcast and she had on Dana White and they were talking about decluttering. And as you know, I recently took a trip home to Pittsburgh and I was coming back to San Antonio. And when I come home, I love to pick up things around the house. I have this fresh energy anytime I come home from a trip, and I always want to be doing things around the house. I already told my husband before I left, when I get home, I am going to be on fire. I'm going to be getting projects done and things are going to be getting in order here. And as I listened to this episode, it was literally life-changing. And I know this sounds so crazy, but so many things that I have learned about organizing and keeping things tidy and cleaning things were just completely busted in this podcast episode. It was so unique the way so many of the myths, I guess, that we have heard really actually were causing so many of us more problems. So let me explain, but not only do I want to explain that in this podcast episode, but I also want to talk to you about this idea of a container, how it can help us in all parts of our lives, not just keeping our house tidy, but in our careers, in everything that we're doing. And it was this one particular key that I just think is going to be so transformational in how I release things from my life. I am one of those people that like to hold on to things, not necessarily physical things. Yes, I have a lot of physical things and I do hold on to them and I find things to be very sentimental, but if you have a fear of missing out, then you're also kind of holding on to things. Maybe you're holding on to things from the past. Maybe you're holding on to future things. But what we can do is really learn to release things through this container. So let me start by just diving into what a container is and how this works. Okay, and I'm going to try to get Dana White on our podcast so she can share with us all of the decluttering stuff that can totally transform your home and energize you at the same time. But what she was talking about on the episode is she shared this story. So as we're working to declutter our homes, or we want to just really keep our houses more clean, what she was sharing is that the key is really to remove things from your home. The reason that it's so hard to keep our homes clean is generally because we have way too much stuff. But we have all been taught this emotional process of releasing things, asking all of these questions like, do I love it? Does it have value? Do I have a use for this? And she was basically busting through and saying, not telling us to ask any of those questions, which was just mind-blowing because it allowed me to think in a different pattern. In the past, I was like, well, of course I love it, right? I loved it because of this memory. I loved it because of that. Do I have a use for it? Of course I do, or I will use it in the future. And so typically I would just find all of these excuses and these reasons to hold on to things. Well, in the episode, she talked about this red bucket, and she shared this story of how she went to another person's house, somebody that was a very clean person, very organized person. Unlike her, she calls herself, the slob that now helps people declutter. But she was saying how this person's house was just so organized. Their craft area was so organized. And, this is what she needed. In order to be able to keep things organized, she knew that she needed a red bucket because in this other person's area, she saw that they had a red bucket and they had all of their crayons in the red bucket. And so when she got home, she got a red bucket and she said, okay, I'm going to put my crayons in here. But the problem is that she had too many crayons. They didn't all fit. So what she had to do was go back to the store and get 2 more red buckets to be able to hold all of her crayons. So she puts all the crayons in the buckets. Then she realizes she doesn't have enough shelf space. She needs a bigger shelf because the crayons don't fit on the shelf. And from there, she's like, well, I don't have room for more shelves. I must need a bigger house. And this is what happens in our lives is we continue to put more and more in. And so when she was talking about a container, she said, we think of as a container as something to hold things, something to carry things in, something to store things neatly in, but that's not really how we should consider a container. A container really is the limit, right? So whatever fits in the container, that is the limit. And when you think about it, even something as simple as crayons, we can get into this kind of mind game that says, well, if I have all these crayons, they still have value, right? Even the broken ones have value. We're not going to get rid of those broken crayons. They still have value. But the truth is we probably don't need 3 buckets of crayons. And I'm thinking I have upstairs, I've got a big box of crayons. My kids rarely color. And I have new packages of crayons that I've probably gotten on sale that I'm like, okay, well, I will gift these. I will put these in the shoe boxes that we make around Christmas time for Operation Christmas Child, or they'll be here for the kids' next years of school. I only have one in elementary school right now. So I know I'm at a point where I probably need to downsize the crayons. And the crayons aren't my big issue. There's other things where I have issues. One of the issues that I have, I can clearly say, because I'm not using all this, I'll never use it. We have a ton of bug killer pesticide Roundup stuff. And it's not that we bought it all. There were times where we had an issue, we bought something. We usually have a pest service, but we have all of this because some of it was left at our house. And even when I was organizing, I'm like, well, what will fit on the shelf? And so I kind of put it on the shelf and I was like, okay. And then yesterday when I was cleaning some stuff up, I realized we have 2 more bottles of this stuff. And I'm like, I don't even like to use pesticide because it has chemicals in it. And I don't want chemicals around me. So I'm like, I'm never even going to use this stuff, but yet I have stored all of it because before I perceived that it has value. And now it doesn't even fit on the shelf that we allocated it for. So it's kind of out of its container. And when I thought about this, what I realized with these containers is, it's not that we can't have something, but we can't have everything, right? So we can have things, but we just can't have everything. And even thinking up to my craft closet that we have so many pens. The first thing of pens overflowed. So I created another container that has new pens in it. So we have a new pens and we have an old or used pens container. Well, that container overflowed. And because these pens still have use, I created a 3rd pen container. So I have 3 bins of pens upstairs, plus pens on my desk, plus pens in my junk drawer, plus pens all around the house. And when I think about this, I'm like, well, why am I holding on to these pens? Well, if I go to it before, well, they have value. I might need a pen in the future. Why am I going to pay for pens? I already have pens. I'm not having to go out and purchase these things. I have pens for the rest of my life. But the truth is those pens are taking up space in my life. So it doesn't need to. It makes it harder to find other things in the craft closet when I have to move one container to get to the other container that are well organized and labeled, but I still have to be moving and shifting things, which just takes more time. And when I'm taking time with things in my life, that's time taken away from the really important things in my life. Okay, so these are all physical things we're talking about, but the key is when the container is full, that is enough. We don't need a second container. We don't need 2 containers of pens, right? That's just not something that we need. And so now as I think about this container, whether it's a bookshelf, whether it's a bin, I'm really going to be thinking okay, I can have books, but I can't have 2,000 books. I can't have 500 books. I can have the amount of books that reasonably fit on my bookshelf, right? I don't need to go out and get another bookshelf. I need to just release some of the books because the truth is I'm not going back. I'm not referencing all these books. I'm not reading all these books again. And so I can release them. And when we think about it this way, we think about these containers, what's so freeing is it's not that you can't ever get that book again, right? I could give away a book today and I could get that book back. I could get that book back. I could purchase it again and it would be okay because if I got rid of 10 books, I likely am not going to go repurchase 10 more of those exact same books because I'm picking up new books. There's new things that are interesting me, but I can't hold on to all of them. They can't all have some kind of meaning to them. But when we just think about it in this container sense, something has to go. Well, the same thing is true for our lives and our careers. And this is what hit me. And this is what I really wanted to share with you. Our calendar is our container for our life. So often we are overwhelmed, we are burnt out, we are stressed in our lives because we overfill them with things. We overfill. We don't appropriate the amount of time something that's going to take. And we put things into our lives, which is our calendar, which is our container, that don't fit. And then when we're stressed out running from the first party to the second party to the third party, and we have no energy by the end of the day, and we're not getting the things done we want in life, it's because we're doing things that don't fit within our life. And so whether it's projects you're taking on in your career, whether it's activities that you're doing with your kids, whether it's date nights or parties or friends or all of the things, it's like we can have all of these things in our lives, but we have to realize that there is a limit to the amount of things that we can put in if we want to be happy. We also need to be following what Stephen Covey talks about. And what he talks about is the big rocks in our lives. And if I were to demonstrate this to you, I would have a container here. And what we would be saying is we want to put our big rocks in first. So if I had a container and I literally had physical rocks, these rocks would represent things in our lives. It could represent our relationship with our family. It could represent our career. It could represent our time with God. But basically these big rocks, the first 5, 6 things are really the things that are really important in your life. And these things really need to hit our calendars first. So our relationship with our spouse, do we have time in our calendar, in our container for our relationship? Have we been intentional in setting this time aside? If not, we need to put it in there. We also need time for ourselves. This could be time, just to have some downtime. Us as women, we need this, especially depending on our cycle. There's different times where we need more downtime. We need time on our schedule to exercise. We need time to be able to be with our kids. Maybe we need time for self-care. So we need to make sure that we are putting ourselves in the container. A lot of times we leave ourselves out. We're like, well, if there's time left, then we'll do these things. But that's not how it should work. The things that are most important, we have to put in first. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at your calendar. And I just want you to kind of reflect, like, does my calendar reflect the type of person I am and what I truly value and what I truly want in life? Because sometimes what we say is, well, I want a better relationship. I want more out of my career. But when we look at it and we think about, well, how are we growing intentionally in our careers? Well, sometimes we're not, because we're not being intentional. There's nothing that we're developing in. Or perhaps we've taken on so much. We've said yes to too many projects that now things aren't fitting. And now we're missing deadlines. And now we're having to work more. And now we're overworking. And now we're putting stress on our families. And so anytime that something new is coming into your life, whether it's a new activity you want to put your child in, a new hobby you want to take on, a new project at work, something, your husband wants to do, whatever it is, I just want you to look at your calendar as your container. And I want you to ask yourself, like, where does this fit? Like, can you literally take your pencil out or get your digital calendar, whatever you prefer, and pencil it in? Where does it fit? And if you put that in there, does something else have to go away? Because that's the thing. And this is what Dana was really teaching. It's like whenever we're kind of decluttering our house, whenever we're moving around, we're shifting things, she tells us to do this thing, right? Not just to have it in a container. It's not about going out and buying fancy containers. She's actually against that. She's like, don't go out and get the fancy containers. That is not the first step. If that is a step, that is the last step that you're really taking, is organizing it in this container area. Because the thing is whenever we go into a space, we really have to say, if this is going to go into the garage, or if this is going to go into the pantry, if this is going to go into my closet or my front room or on my wall, what needs to come off? What needs to come off? And the same thing is true with our schedules. In order to be able to fit this new item into our lives, what do we need to remove? And when we can think from this mindset, it's not that we have to tell ourselves, well, you can't do that, but perhaps you can't do that right now. It's the same thing when I'm coaching business owners. I see this. Recently, I had one person, they were listing off all of these things that they wanted to do. And it was incredible, write a book, start a podcast, different courses, all of these things. create a lead magnet, get new clients, all of these things they wanted to do. And it's like, okay, you can do all of those things, but what is it? What is the thing you're going to do right now? What is the thing you're going to focus on? What are you going to put onto your calendar, into your container that can fit? Because it's when we're putting things into our container, into our lives that don't fit, that we become overwhelmed, we become burnt out, and we think of ourselves as failures. And it's not that we're failures. It's not that we're incompetent. It's not that we're incapable. It's just that we've actually taken on too much, and we need to remove something from our containers so we can breathe. We can have more space. We can have the space we need to be able to find the things and do the things that we really love. And so I just want you to think about your calendar as your container. And I want you to use this to free yourself to say, I don't have to take on everything. I don't need to do everything. I don't have to have it all right now. I can. I'm not saying I can never do this, but right now, at this point in my life, the things that are most important to go into my calendar, into my container, are these things. And then be intentional with what you're selecting, knowing that in a year from now, in 2 years from now, in 3 years from now, you can intentionally change these things out. When you'll do this, you're going to feel so much calmer, knowing that you're not passing up these great opportunities. You're really actually investing more into the relationship and the opportunities that you've already said yes to. You don't have to fear missing out. The opportunity will exist again in the future. It almost always does. Now, on the other hand, if you're looking at your calendar, if you're looking at your container, you're feeling kind of bored and you're like, I don't have a lot of direction, there's not a whole lot going on here, then I want to encourage you to be more intentional about putting stuff into your container that's going to actually give you the life that you want. On our previous episode with David Price, we were talking about mindset. We were talking about growth. We were talking about working with coaches, being in communities, and being intentional about creating the life that we really truly want. And if you're feeling like my container is empty, then I want you to be intentional about adding something to that. It could be a course, it could be a book, it could be a community, it could be anything that's going to add value and create happiness in your life as you continue on the journey of being the person that God has always created you to be. Well, I hope that you found this as helpful and as exciting as I have. I know I am on fire with these containers, and I just can't wait to continue to mold and create not only my home, but my calendar and my life intentionally to be what I want it to be without feeling like I'm missing out on something. Because if God wanted us to truly do even more, He would have given us more time in a day. And the truth is, He only gave us 24 hours. He requires us to sleep. He requires us to eat. He wants us to spend time with Him, and He wants us to rest. He tells us all of these things. And so we have to fit these things into our container. And if after we fit all of these things in, there's only X amount of time left, then that is all the time that we need to accomplish God's will, God's purpose, and God's plan for our life. So we can rest knowing that if we will think and we can ask God what He wants us to intentionally put into our calendars, into our container without overflowing it, then we can live in more peace knowing that we are fulfilling the will of God. Well, that's all we have for today, friends. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Mary Guirovich Show. I can't wait till we meet again in the next episode where we'll have another amazing guest. So be sure to join me. And until we meet again, remember, you're only one plan away from your next promotion. And God, He's not done with you.
Hey, friend. Thank you for listening today. Be sure to join us next week for another great episode. If you receive value from today's show, I'd appreciate it if you would leave us a 5-star review to help others learn about the show. And if you're ready to fast track your career and increase your income, impact, and joy, then head on over to maryguirovich.com and check out the masterclass that teaches you how you can advance too. I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. This and so much more can be found in the show notes. I look forward to seeing you soon.